Hi everyone, welcome to some more Screenwriters Tips. I am Tony D and I do the Webcomic Factory and Superfrat webcomic sites. I'm also a screenwriter, and so we're doing some very sort of basic screenwriting tips. Today's tip, we're going to talk about script breakdowns and how this may impact your writing of the screenplay. Okay, so what's a breakdown? And again, we're talking about mostly the kind of low budget movies that you're going to be working on, not big studio productions that have millions of dollars of funding. When you have millions of dollars, really, worrying about what you're writing in the script in terms of the budget probably isn't that big of a deal. But when you're working in low budget, a lot of times you're actually scripting for a specific budget that's very low. And you got to think about what costs money. And these days, the kind of filmmakers you're probably going to end up working with are guys who are looking for low budget or micro budget thrillers, dramas, comedies, whatever. So, here are some tips. In terms of the breakdown of the script, after you finish the script, you generally hand it off to the producer, director. The director's going to break it down in terms of shots. The producer will probably give it to someone who's going to do the budget. This might be some kind of production coordinator position. Might be a guy who specifically does budgets. I don't really do budgets myself. I have a friend who does it, and I've seen him work it. There's different ways to work the numbers depending on what kind of budget you're going for. But in general, there's some sort of broad rules. And again, this is all basic information that you want to keep in mind while you're writing the screenplay. The first is when a production guy breaks apart the script, they're going to split the script into interiors and exteriors, and that's why you put that in the screenplay. It's very important because the interior shots generally are easier to do, because since they're inside, you have more control. You don't have to worry about the weather. The equipment can stay inside a building generally, which then can be locked up, and the lights can stay where they are, and then you can just show up the next morning and start shooting again, turn the lights on and go. In exteriors, obviously you can't do that. You're at the weather's mercy. God forbid it starts to rain. A good person who can really organize the shoot will have knowledge of the weather, and then know not to schedule the exterior shots on days that it may rain or snow or whatever. And in fact, you may get a weird day where it's just really windy, and it's screwing up the sound, and it's making the whole shoot weird. And at that point, the whole production may turn on a dime, like, hey, let's go back inside and shoot some more interiors. So you need that flexibility, especially in a low budget movie. So when you're scripting, you need to keep that in mind. Now, it kind of depends on the kind of movie you're writing. If you're writing something that takes place where most of the movie takes place outside and there's really no way around that, the thing to keep in mind is certain exteriors are easier than others. So an easy exterior is the woods, right? So like the Blair Witch Project, most of it could have been shot in 2 or 3 acres of woods, and you won't have to walk miles and miles and miles to get these different locations. You really only have to go, a couple of dozen feet one direction or another, as long as you don't have a really, say, visible tree with a specific look to it that the audience is going to recognize. It's just going to be all trees, right? So that's just, the woods, as far as exteriors go, tends to be a little easier. Now, the production is obviously going to have some issues. They got to be on battery, or they got to bring a generator out into the woods, or they got to be really close to a building that they could get electricity from that is near the woods, depending on what you have access to. But in general, the exteriors are probably going to be harder than the interiors. Like just doing stuff on the street tends to be a problem because you don't know what's going to happen. People can walk by. You might need permits. There's a whole. You might have to block off the street. You might have to get PAs to keep people at bay until you shoot the scene, and You know, you might have to shoot very early in the morning to try to get done before there's a lot of people on the street. You might have to shoot on the weekends. You know, it kind of depends on the movie and where you need to shoot. That brings me to my second thing, locations. The fewer locations you have, the lower the budget will be. Now, obviously, you don't want to ruin the sense of the world of the movie by making things too tight. But if you can shoot mostly inside in the same 2 or 3 locations, that's a lot easier. It's a lot cheaper. You know, for instance, oh damn, I forget the name of the movie. There's this movie, it's about a group of characters in a house, and they get shifted into an alternate reality in the house. So the whole movie's shot either in the house or just outside. That's an easier movie to shoot because obviously while you're shooting the interiors, you know, you can only shoot so much, and then, well, the day's over. What happens? You can leave the light, you turn off the lights and the camera, you can leave them in the house, lock the place up. Maybe people live there or a couple of PAs stay there just to watch the equipment overnight, and boom, the next morning, it saves you time and money. You don't have to set up, the lights are all ready to go. All you can do is turn them on and reposition, tweak things, and then boom, you're off and running again. So that's very handy to have. So if you have scenes like that, that's a good thing, keeps the price of the movie down. So if you have a scene, for instance, with 2 characters having coffee in a coffee shop, and then later in the movie, the same 2 characters are having a drink at a bar. If it doesn't make a difference to the movie, you might as well have them both in the coffee shop in both scenes, because it's easier just to change the day, change the wardrobe, and you could shoot both the coffee shop scenes on the same day, or you shoot them both in the bar, whichever's easier to do and whichever works better in the screenplay. Now obviously if you have to be in 2 different locations, there's no way around that, but if it doesn't matter to the movie, try to keep it in the same locations. Another thing that you must be aware of is too many actors. Obviously the more actors you need, the more complicated the shoot is, the more money's probably going to be spent. Although in a low budget movie, extras and, you know, guys who only have 1 or 2 lines, I mean, and I'm talking really low budget movies, these guys may not get paid anything. They may just be doing it for the credit or just to get free pizza that day. So you want to keep those guys to a minimum too, because on a low budget movie, you may not be working with top grade A actors. You may be working with people who are pretty talented, but they haven't worked a lot and they're just starting out, and their acting skills may not be good. So you can't give them a lot to do. Even just, we had an actor on one shoot, which I won't tell you what movie it was, but I mean, the guy was just awful. And he ruined every scene he was in, and he was improvising lines and getting in the way of the shot, and you know, it was a real problem. They had to edit around him and cut out his dialogue. Like they literally went in, took out his sound and replaced it with ambient noise because his delivery was that bad. And fortunately, you know, it was a shot where they crop him out and you don't see his mouth moving, so they basically cut him out of the movie as much as possible. They had to. He was ruining the scenes. So, you know, keep it down to a minimum of people. Obviously, if you need a big world, you're going to have a couple of big world shots in it. But if you can limit them to just, say, the beginning and ends of the movie, maybe one shot in the middle, or just hints at this bigger world, rather than, you know, these big epic shots of the street and dozens of people moving and cars. Like, all that stuff costs money. And if you're in a low budget movie, you just can't do that stuff. You got to find ways around it. And you should be thinking about that while you're writing the movie, because there are filmmakers right now looking for micro budget and low budget movies. These guys are just starting out and they just can't do this stuff. And if they have to make the changes, that's going to be worse than if you do it 9 times out of 10. Now, it might be better, maybe they're good, But if you're a good screenwriter and you already design it to be low budget, then whatever dialogue or plot device you use to make that happen will be better integrated while you're sitting at home writing the thing than if some director has to retrofit a scene because of pragmatic and budgetary concerns. Better you do it. Finally, you also have the star, right? So a lot of times in a low budget movie, they'll at least have one star. Maybe he's a C or D list celebrity, but he has a name, people would recognize him, and they need to put him in there just to get distribution, and maybe just put him on the DVD or movie poster or whatever, and maybe that's all he's agreed to. Chances are a guy like that's going to get a little bit of money, not a little bit, but a lot for more than anybody on the movie. He's just in it for his name. So maybe he gets $30,000 for 2 days of work, just to shoot that. So you have to be cognizant of that guy's role. And you may even create a character specifically for a actor like that. Because low budget movies like to have that, just a cameo. Again, if you don't have that, you may have a situation where the producer or director retrofits it in just so they can use this actor. They'll probably come to you. Hopefully, a producer and a director with sense will come to the screenwriter, if that develops later on. Oh, we got this guy. Can you write this scene for him? It may just be one scene just to have this name in there. But it's something you should be cognizant of while you're writing the screenplay. So to just go over, fewer locations, try to keep them inside, and try to keep as few characters as possible. Also, one other thing you could do, and this is a little more risky, is you could do scenes without dialogue. Now, if you do that, and there's a significant portion of the movie that does that, they can actually not use sound that day, and that may save on equipment and crew, right? So they just send the sound guy home, and you're going to shoot some silent footage. The downside of that is, again, you may not be working with the greatest actors in the world, so it's going to require more acting from people when you're doing silent stuff, because the expressions then become 100 times more important, and their actions too. So you're just going to have to be aware of that. And also they may have to use music, which also may cost money, or you can't have a lot of no dialogue scenes with ambient noise unless they're really good and really intense. So it's a balance that you're going to have to figure out according to what's in your screenplay, what the budget is, and where you can save money. And the only other thing is, in terms of the shots, right? Now, screenwriters aren't supposed to put a tremendous amount of shots in the movie. That's really more the director's thing. But you are supposed to put in the real key shots for the reveals. Especially if you're doing like a mystery, you'll put in close-up of the smoking gun or close-up of the bloody dagger or something like that. But generally, you want to keep those close-ups, wide shots, angle on. You want to keep those vague, right? You don't want to say, you don't want to have the pans and the shots. I mean, it kind of depends on the director and the producer. I've had it from both ends, I give them the same script, and one guy will say, oh man, there's way too many shots in here. And then another guy, same damn script, they'll say, man, you should have put more shots in here. I don't know where I am. So, you have to work that out between the producers and directors. But if you have some measure of control over that, you want to stay away from things like crane shots. Those are very expensive to do. Moving shots are going to be tougher to do. They can have a cameraman in a car, handheld, but it's not going to necessarily look all that great. Towing a car and shooting through the windshield's really tough. That's a whole other expense. Kind of depends on the movie. It's better that people aren't moving and the camera is in a place that's easy to position. You could cheat it. You could do over the head shots by putting a guy up on a roof if you have easy access to a roof. If it's in a city where like the stairwell goes up to the roof, that's totally doable. Or if you got some other location that's not like dangerous for the cameraman to climb up to, and you know the camera's not going to be in any danger of blowing off and crash into the ground, sure, you could do something like that. But you know, the keys are to stay inside and do stuff that's low budget, that can all be shot at once, right? So if most of the movie takes place inside, and there's just a few scenes outside to just sort of establish things and keep the bigness of the world going in the movie, that's pretty much ideal, you know, because then you get a few production shots, you know, high production shots. If here's a good tip. To get the credits, some nice credits on one of the movies I was on, the producer went on a helicopter ride, like one of these things where you go on a helicopter ride around the city, and he brought the cameraman, and for the price of the helicopter ride, they shot a bunch of footage flying over Philadelphia. And it looked really nice, you know? You get one of these high-end cameras, and it just cost them the helicopter ride. That is an innovative way of doing it, you know? So always be thinking of those things when you're doing when you're writing a movie and you're doing a breakdown. Don't get too obsessed by them. I mean, obviously the story's the most important thing, but it's something to consider when you're writing a screenplay. Okay, so that's it for now. If you like the video, or if you have any tips or questions, some things about screenwriting you'd like me to cover, please feel free to discuss it in the comments section. My name is Tony D, and I'll see you next time.